Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us this evening for our Rain Garden 101 webinar. My name is Ken Lohman, and I am the Environmental Sustainability Manager for the City of Woodland. Tonight's webinar is about a rain garden that the city has constructed at the northeast corner of Crawford Park, which is adjacent to the sidewalk along El Dorado Drive, and actually under the sidewalk as well. This rain garden project offers what we hope will be a beautiful, functional, and educational addition to the park that will also highlight a drought-tolerant landscape and demonstrate how you can do that at home or in the included in possible developments later on. For tonight's webinar, we're going to have several different sections. We're going to start off with a video overview of the Rain Garden project. We're going to get an introduction to green infrastructure by Kevin Perry, who is one of the project designers. We're going to meet a couple of local master gardeners who are going to talk about a couple of relevant topics. Linda Magram from the Master Gardeners will talk about drought-tolerant plants, and Mary Stokes will give us an overview of rain gardens and bioretention. After those, we're going to have a question and answer session, followed by announcement of raffle winners, which I know is what everybody's here for real. If you do have any questions at any time throughout the presentation and you don't want to wait or you're afraid you might forget them before the Q&A session, please feel free to type them into the chat box or the Q&A within Zoom, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So to kick things off for the evening, here is a quick video overview of the rain garden.
This rain garden at Crawford Park is located at 1733 College Street, Woodland, California. Before the rain garden was constructed, the northeast corner of the park used to be a large grassy area. In June 2021, construction began to create a demonstration garden which is meant to exemplify the role of small-scale green infrastructure and the impact they can create within our communities. In August 2021, the project was completed and the space that was once green grass has been transformed into a rain garden that will divert stormwater from El Dorado Drive into a retention swale. We have also added a drought-tolerant demonstration garden with shaded seated area for people to stop by and enjoy this new space. Landscaping includes native, drought-tolerant, and pollinator-friendly plants that are suitable for sun and shade, as well as wet and dry conditions. Early inspiration for the rain garden was based on a concept design plan that was created by the California Student Leadership in Green Infrastructure at UC Davis. The project was then developed through a partnership between the City of Woodland and the Local Government Commission, which provided partial funding through a Great Urban Parks Campaign grant from the National Recreation and Park Association. Grants made through this program are intended to improve local environmental equality, increase access to high-quality park spaces for residents, and create a community that is engaged in green stormwater infrastructure solutions. What used to be a grass-covered area has been transformed into a beautiful and functional space that will also serve as a venue for ongoing educational opportunities about green infrastructure and sustainable gardening. This rain garden shows that even small projects such as this one can make a difference by reducing the amount of runoff from stormwater and providing a space for pollinators to thrive. To learn more about this project, visit envirowoodland.org/raingarden.
Hi everyone, I'm Atlee Keller, Project Manager at the Local Government Commission. As Sayetsi mentioned, LGC was awarded funding through the Great Urban Parks campaign from the National Recreation and Park Association to promote and advance green infrastructure and stormwater projects within parks in California. And the City of Woodland is one of the 3 projects that we were able to pursue. So we're super happy to be here to talk to you about the project today. And with that, I would like to, first, actually, I would like to talk about our questionnaire that I know many of you filled out. And we want to reward you for your participation in that questionnaire by announcing our raffle later tonight, very shortly. But if you haven't participated yet in the questionnaire, it's not too late. You can follow that link, envirowoodland.org/raingarden, and complete the questionnaire. We'll have a second raffle if you complete it by September 17th. And we will share the questionnaire link in the chat so that you have access to that again. And with that, I will hand it over to Kevin Robert Perry, a local landscape architect that's been working on this project.
Hey, thanks, Atlee, and good evening, everyone. The common question, why do we need green infrastructure? Why do we need rain gardens like the Crawford Park Rain Garden? And the answer is often hard to say, especially when we're in the middle of summertime temperatures. But if you advance to the next slide, there's a good reason as to why we do this work. So when we do get our rain, and it'll come soon, all the flow that would normally go into the ground would, in our built environment, with our streets, with parking lots, with rooftops, that water is often quickly washed into our storm drain system, where untreated pollutants and trash get caught up into the drains. And then ultimately, that water, if you advance to the next slide, that water is then ultimately deposited into our local waterways, whether it be a creek, a stream, or ultimately our larger rivers. And so, that's bad news when it comes to water quality and just the overall health of our streams and our creeks. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. The good news is that we have a variety of techniques to capture that water within the landscape as if nature would have done it before we built a lot of our impervious surfaces, such as streets, parking lots, and rooftops. And so we can use rain gardens, we can use pervious pavement, we can use swales, even green roofs in some applications to capture that water, slow it down, and treat the runoff before it gets to the storm drain system, and ultimately help replenish the aquifers, which we badly need in our current drought situation. So the more water we can capture in rain gardens, the better environmental health and better water supply we'll have for the future. And it goes without saying that green infrastructure has benefits to the community beyond that of just water. So by providing green infrastructure like the Crawford rain garden and park projects or streetscape projects, it brings us all that much closer to the natural environment. It could also, if you're looking at planting trees or removing hardscape and putting back in landscape, we can reduce the urban heat island effect. So reducing temperatures that we would get in high heat events. It also provides, and it's dependent on the plant species you choose, but really valuable habitat for insects and pollinators, which have been also under a lot of stress lately. And then, of course, one of the main benefits is that it helps reduce the impacts of flooding, localized flooding. And that's not to say that green infrastructure is going to be, the catch-all for any major flood event, but on the smaller storms and even the larger storms, being able to slow that water down helps everything downstream. So rain gardens like the Crawford Park Rain Garden are super important to the system. And then when designed really well, it creates a beautiful garden for everyone to enjoy, both on a sunny day as well as on the rainy days as well. And then over time, these rain gardens grow and provide a really beautiful amenity for the local residents. And we expect that to occur at Crawford Park as well. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. So the Crawford Park Rain Garden was really initiated by an effort from a group that I started at UC Davis called the California Student Leadership and Green Infrastructure, or SLGI for short. And this is an all volunteer group of myself and students that come together every year. We identify simple projects like the one that we have here in Woodland, whether it be a park or a street or a building roof downspout, that we can retrofit very quickly with low effort, low dollars. And so we had the opportunity to actually work on a concept design for the overall neighborhood in Woodland surrounding Crawford Park. And we looked at the park with a critical eye. And then in the next slide, we noticed that there was an incredible opportunity to look at several areas for rain gardens in and around Crawford Park, but the rain garden where it exists today offered the least amount of constraints. We captured quite a bit of stormwater runoff, close to 12,000 square feet of street drainage goes to the rain garden when it rains. And we had previous success of doing this on the UC Davis campus by capturing the street runoff and routing it from the street underneath the sidewalk zone into rain gardens. And so our eyes perked up when we saw this space. And at that point, it was a great opportunity to approach the city of Woodland and the surrounding neighborhood for the idea of the Crawford Park Rain Garden. So it's really fun to see this project move forward and get to its completion. And now the fun part is watching it grow. And so UC Davis will be a part of that growth throughout the years, looking to help provide good stewardship for the Crawford Park Rain Garden. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Linda, right?
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Sayetsi Sanchez, and I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator for the City of Woodland. Coming right up, we have two more presentations that have been pre-recorded by the YOLO Master Gardeners. As a quick reminder, if you do have any questions throughout any of these presentations, you are more than welcome to type it into the Q&A box down below or add them into the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of both the presentations. So first presentation will be by Linda Magrum. We'll do a quick presentation on drought-tolerant plants.
Hello, my name is Linda Magrum. I am a landscape designer and I have been a Yolo County Master Gardener for 18 years. Today I'm going to talk to you about landscaping with drought-tolerant plants. Although we in the Central Valley can grow almost anything from tropical, temperate to desert plants, there are some that are best suited to our climate. These are the plants that are adapted to our hot, dry summers and mild, generally wet winters. They require minimal amounts of water during the summer, and some of those plants actually prefer no additional water once they're established. We refer to these as drought-tolerant plants. There are three general categories of drought-tolerant plants that work well for us here. One is California native plants, particularly those that occur naturally in our area or historically did occur in our area. Plants that are native to places with a climate like ours. We have a Mediterranean climate, and there are a number of other places around the globe that do as well. So plants from those areas do well here. And plants native to the southwestern US and Mexico. Many of these lands are desert-like, and their plants are highly drought-tolerant and do well in the Central Valley. What are some good ways to use drought-tolerant plants in your landscape? I'll mention a couple of features and show you some photographs. One thing you can do is create a dry creek that runs across your yard, and you can line it with drought-tolerant plants. You can create a rain garden and landscape it with drought-tolerant plants. You would include channels that bring the water to it from your downspouts. If you have a low spot in your yard, you can fill it with rocks and maybe a big boulder so that you make it a feature rather than just a low spot. And this is a place that water can soak into the ground rather than just running off. You can remove your lawn, plant a variety of drought-tolerant trees and shrubs and perennials, mulch the surface with bark or stone, and install drip irrigation, which is then covered by the bark or stone, and you'll have a very lovely drought-tolerant and resilient landscape. So I'm going to show you a few photographs. This is a very natural-looking dry creek. You can see it wanders, meanders through the landscape. It has a variety of different size stones in it. contrasts nicely with the bark and the plants on the other sides. And this is a much more artistically designed dry creek. The stones in the middle have been laid on edge so that they basically create the illusion of flowing water. This would take some time to do, but it's a very beautiful way to make a dry creek that looks quite convincing. And then here's another one in a landscape that is mulched pretty much entirely with stone. The dry creek stands out because the stones are they're larger, rounded, grayer in color than the surrounding mulch, which is a tan colored stone. And this one is unique in that it has a bridge over it. And that is something you could do as they did with concrete, or it could be done with wood. Here is an example of a residential rain garden, a depression in the yard into which water can flow and settle into the earth. This would be fed by drainage pipes, which collect water from the downspouts. The water would flow in over these rocks and fill the basin. The next one would look good in a shady or more woodsy location. This one is edged with stacked rock and has ferns and irises and grasses on the bottom. The water would flow in over the rocks at the rear and look like a little waterfall when it was filling. And this would be very lovely, as I say, in a more wooded looking landscape. And this rain garden has a special feature of a fountain in the middle. This looks right at home because it's a drilled rock, and this would be able to function even when there is no water in the rain garden. And then here's a very simple rain garden that anyone could do. It's just a strip of land between two driveways. It's been given edges with some Corten steel, and the downspout just flows into it over some flat stones, and it's filled with grass-like plants. These are probably lomandra, but grasses, sedges, so forth would work. And here is the newly completed Crawford Park rain garden. And we are all looking forward to the first big rain when we see this one actually function as a rain garden. So rain gardens are shallow depressions that are located and constructed in such a way as to capture runoff from hard surfaces. They are planted with deep-rooted native plants and other climate-appropriate plants that can tolerate occasional wet periods. After a storm, rain gardens filled with water, the water filters slowly into the surrounding soil instead of going into a storm drain. And the plants there help filter contaminants out of the water, such as oil or grease, which makes them particularly helpful in an urban setting. So rain gardens require 3 different kinds of plants. They can all be native plants, but the ones at the bottom have to withstand being submerged for short periods of time. And the plants along the sides like better drainage than the ones at the bottom, but they don't mind the extra water as long as the soil drains. And then the ones at the top are the true drought tolerant plants that can take minimal water in summer. So I've listed some examples of those 3 categories. I'm not going to go through it in detail. If you're interested, I'm sure you'd be able to access this slide, but you'll see there are sedges. There's one native grass, plants we call rushes, and our native iris would also work in that category. In the Crawford Park Garden, you would find Berkeley sedge. And these are plants that do well on the sides. Again, grasses and sedges primarily, and rushes. The showy milkweed is a California native. You would find that at Crawford Park, and you would find this grass that's native to the Midwest, West, and occurs in California as well, blue grandma grass. And then the plants at the top are the most drought tolerant ones. Many of our California natives are there. The ones you'll find at Crawford Park are a yellow form of yarrow, and bulbini, which is a South African native, also has a Mediterranean climate. There is Cleveland sage and hummingbird sage. And so you can go to that spot and see them. And then at the very top or along the sides near the top, it's often very attractive to plant some small trees or shrubs. And the one used in Crawford Park is our native Western redbud. Our native elderberry would also work well there. And native California lilac is a possibility too. And then I've listed a couple that would also tolerate some shade. If you have any questions, please enter them under chat and they will be answered at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much.
All righty. The next presenter is Mary Stokes, who will present on rain gardens and bioretention.
Hello,
my name's Mary Stokes, and I'm a master gardener here in Woodland. And I've been really intrigued with this project that's underway at Crawford Park and reading about it in the paper and so on. We are enjoying being able to watch it get built. And one thing I've been learning about it is that it's not a pond. You might have thought that if you saw the little backhoe working out there, digging a shallow, what looked like might be a pond. But it's actually been refilled now with amended soils and layers of gravel to promote percolation. So the water that feeds into it won't actually be standing for very long or long enough for mosquitoes to reproduce. It's a shallow contoured garden that's carefully placed to catch stormwater runoff. You can see the little gate there in the gutter in front on El Dorado Drive, that only the gutter will have to be so high before it starts to drain into the pond. And one of our master gardeners likes to say, slow it, spread it, and sink it. She's talking about runoff. And that's exactly what this is going to do. It's a small-scale water filtering system. Out in the wilds, wetlands and grasslands naturally serve to shield watersheds from many pollutants, even pathogens that can cause illness, by filtering the water down through the soil and the plants. And in town, with good design, our gardens can function in a similar way. One big plus of this project will be the increased biodiversity and wildlife habitat in the little rain garden area. When you think about it, we're going from turf grass, monoculture that's almost sterile in terms of wildlife values, to a variety of shrubs, trees, and perennials that will bring in the diverse plants, just automatically bring in more diverse wildlife, and underground as well. So we won't even see all of those benefits, but we'll certainly enjoy the ones we can see. A surprising bonus of this rain garden idea is that it may serve as a better carbon sink. In this little sketch, you can see turf grass in the center, the biomass of the turf grass, much less than the deep-rooted native plants on the right. And because the native shrubs and plants store so much of their biomass beneath the surface, they're less vulnerable to fire. And the soils continue to build. Some scientists are arguing that grassland restorations will be more resilient to climate upsets, even than forests, which I've been thinking, tree planting is what we wanted to do. But grasslands have great potential here as well. We want to slow down the water to give it time to soak in. And rain gardens are an attractive way to do this. Research shows up to 40% more water will infiltrate into the ground than in the same size lawn. So it's a big improvement over the lawn in that regard as well. And fast-moving runoff water carries a lot of pollutants downstream, excess fertilizers, pesticides, and even motor oil, other petroleum products from cars. Increasing the amount of water that we can infiltrate the ground in our yards can help to recharge local and regional groundwater. This little sketch that's from the book called Rain Gardens by Nigel Dennett shows the percentage all the way from an undeveloped area on the left to an urban area on the right. And on the left, you can see that 25% of the rainfall will infiltrate deep into the groundwater. But if you go all the way over to the urban landscape, it's down to 5%. And it's just the reverse for the surface runoff. In the urban sketch, you see 55% of the rainfall going straight into the storm drains. In the natural area, it's dropped down to 10%. And those first flush rains we hope we're going to be getting in the fall after a long dry spell are the most contaminated of all, especially from accumulations of dried motor oil and other automotive fluids. And many drivers are familiar with the slick that forms right at the beginning of the rainy season, and it's more hazardous driving. Excess fertilizers wash downstream into the river and can feed the growth of algae and other water plants downstream. There's been a lot of media attention to algae blooms, and so we want to protect our river delta system. Another thing that we don't think about is that pathogens are carried by stormwater runoff. You may have seen in the paper how bacteria levels can close beaches to swimmers because they get too high. But there's even an organism that's called toxoplasma that causes toxoplasmosis in cats, and that can be transmitted to wildlife, including sea otters. A lot of the research on the sea otter recovery has been identifying this toxoplasmosis illness that we think of as being with cats, but when the organism washes downstream, it gets into the Monterey Bay, and I'm sure there are other mammals besides sea otters that are subject to this. So we can actually be part of the solution of so many of these problems of keeping the water on our property. While an individual rain garden attached to a downspout on your house might seem like a small thing, collectively they can produce real benefits to our neighborhood and community. There's tons of material out there about how to do it, but there's a few tips that you can catch on to pretty quickly. One of the things is that you have to get the water 10 feet away from your building foundations. You want to avoid underground utilities, septic tanks, any spots that already tend to be soggy, and large tree roots. You could start root crown rot with extra water going around your big trees. And here in Woodland, our heavy clay soils need more amending to drain properly and a larger spread area. There are many more water saving ideas out there. And here in Woodland, we even have rebates for some of them Right now, you can get a rebate on a rain barrel to catch that first barrel full from your downspout and mulch. At present, you can get a rebate for a fresh layer of mulch, which will hold a lot of that moisture in the soil. And when you're planting pathways or patios, think permeable. There's all sorts of ways to do it. There's even pavers now they make that are perforated so that you get that infiltration happening even with a nice surface for your walkway or patio. There's many great resources available to us, not least of which is the UC Davis Arboretum Teaching Nursery. You can tour their gardens, demonstration water saving gardens, and check out their blog posts under the title Life After Lawn. UC Ag and Natural Resources has free publications both on rain gardens and sustainable landscapes for California. And if you're a YouTube fan, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there, including this segment from This Old House about rain gardens and another one hosted by the Nature Conservancy. So I think SciETSE will be able to send you an electronic list that's more complete of resources if you decide to give it a go. But thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you all out at Crawford Park. Hello, my name's
Thank you to our wonderful master gardeners for those presentations, very informative, and I'm seeing the questions popping up, so keep them coming. We'll start by I want to ask SciETSE, city's water conservation coordinator, from your perspective, why would a resident want to put green infrastructure components in their yard?
Of course. So from what we learned today, we learned that green infrastructure will help reduce your water usage in your lawn when you're harvesting rainwater, which as a result would also decrease your water bill during the summer. We will also see a reduction in runoff from our local waterways. This will be helping our local water supply. It would also help improve the resilience for air quality, urban cooling, and just the aesthetics alone would also be beneficial. You would be comparing a brown lawn essentially to a beautiful green rain garden that's also helping a lot of our pollinators and birds around the area.
Thank you, SciETSE. I'm seeing in the question chat about resources, more resources, and SciETSE will send around both these slides as well as a compilation of resources that we've come across to help you learn more about rain gardens and implementing them in your own homes. This person specifically is in Winters and wants to know about how to deal with French drains and perhaps what regulations might be in place regarding water collection. Does anyone have any thoughts on that, or how? I'm not sure how that varies across cities versus the county. Kevin, are you able to unmute yourself and speak to French drains?
Sorry. So French drains are essentially drains that collect water, typically from around a foundation of a house, where you have water that's seeping from the landscape, and the landscape's graded to these open trenches with a perforated pipe in the trench that then conveys that water away from the house foundation, and thus preventing water migration to go into places that you don't want it to go to. Now, that is a reasonable approach to do with and around homes when you don't want to infiltrate water within that 10-foot area. But the best solution is then to capture that water and then redirect it into a rain garden that is farther away from the house, where it does have an opportunity to soak into the ground. And like Ali had mentioned, there's a lot of variability as to what cities would like to see with respect to codes with French drains. So I can't speak with any more detail other than that, but I know that even from my own house, that is a solution that I've came up with respect to water being too close to a house, to redirect it and then get it to the rain garden proper that's just outside of that 10-foot zone from the house. I don't know if that specifically answers the question, but it might it might lead into that right direction and then maybe give some insight to others too.
Thanks, Kevin. I have another question, and others can chime in if you would like, but how are stones for landscaping sourced? How does someone make sure that they source them without impacting actual rivers? And the same question for mulch. Responsible sourcing of stones and mulch.
I have to say, I've never been asked that question before, and I think it's a great question. And I would say that that is a great question to ask a landscape contractor or a nursery, is exactly, where do you get your stones? Because or the mulch for that matter. Mulch may be a more definitive answer, but the stones itself, I haven't been asked that question. I don't have an answer to it.
Well, I have a question that I know that you do know the answer to. Can you explain how you arrived at the selection of non-native drought-tolerant plants? There's concerns about further introducing problematic non-natives, even if they are drought-tolerant.
Should I go first on that one? I'm welcome to. So again, another great question, and there's been a lot of eyes on the planting plan as to what plants would perform best for this particular rain garden, and a lot of the choices that we made comes back to past experience with rain gardens in the local area, which ones are doing well, which ones haven't done so well, given our heat, given potential of extreme flood events. So what's the right sweet spot between having a plant selection that can respond to both wet and dry conditions? And a lot of it is still experimental in terms of which ones are the best ones. So we're looking at plants that we feel, based on past experience, have done well. And also plants that reduce the amount of maintenance over time as well. So we're looking at performance and then just ease of maintenance. That's where a lot of the plant material or plant species were derived from.
Linda, I saw you pop up. Do you have any?
Yes, I could add to that. If we were to stick with truly local native plants that were native to the Central Valley, we would have a really small palette of plant choices for our landscapes. So the next best solution, other than trying some that actually prefer the coast or the mountains, when we do grow many of those, they're not as happy here as the ones that were originally here, bunch grasses and valley oaks, for instance. But the next best choice is ones from the areas that I mentioned in my talk, places with Mediterranean climates and places with a hot, dry climate like the Southwest US. So it is important not to plant something that's going to be invasive or have other problems, but realistically, if we want a landscape that has a variety of plants and color, we really kind of need to go beyond what grew here originally.
I was also going to just follow up too, because I've been doing this type of work for some time, and the landscape will change. The plants will change as trees mature. Full sun will change over to part shade and even full shade. So, it's not a static condition. There will be times way off in the future where the plant that we originally planted may get shaded out, and there'll be a new plant species that needs to go in. And that's the same just in nature too. There's always change that occurs. So we're trying to make the best decisions of what we know right now and have done well in the past, but that will too change.
Atlee, I'd like to jump in and add a little bit to the end of that as well.
Please do.
That one thing that's important, I think, for everyone to keep in mind is if you're developing a little project in your yard, then you have to figure out, first off, what are your values and how do you want to reflect them in what you're doing, and decide what you like. But there's also practical considerations as well. So for example, with the Crawford Park Rain Garden, there were 2 plants that were on the original plant list that simply were not available commercially. So the landscape contractor submitted a request to swap those out for 2 other plants that were similar and were available commercially locally. And that request was passed along to the landscape architect that designed the rain garden, and she felt they were appropriate and signed off on that. I believe there was some discussion early on also about another decision that was made earlier, where there was one particular plant that was desired, but it didn't really fit right in terms of the hydrology of where in the garden it would be. So there was an eastern variety of that fit better in that location. So you may decide that you really, really like a certain plant that has a certain type of flower or leaf, and where you want to put it will kill it, but it might have a cousin from somewhere else that would just grow fine there. So deciding how tightly you want to value local native plants versus the color palette or the type of garden aesthetic that you want to create, those are balancing decisions that everybody will have to make as you design your own garden.
Thanks, Kim. We have time for some quick few more questions. I'll tie these together. So first, does the rain garden need water during the summer? And then secondly, why does the rain garden absorb more water than lawn?
I could speak to the first part of that. Yes, the rain garden will need some water in summer. That would be supplied by drip irrigation. The plants at the bottom are, many California natives, but given that they can tolerate soggy conditions, they probably aren't going to be happy going for 3, 4, 5 months with no water at all. So yes, drip irrigation will keep them happier. And we want them to be healthy and look good. The ones on the side also. And to be honest, even the most drought tolerant natives that in nature might survive without water will need water until they're well established, until they get their roots down deep enough to take advantage of the water that has seeped into the ground. So I have to defer on the second part. I'm not sure.
I can jump in unless anybody else wants to.
Go.
The question was, why do rain gardens absorb more water than your typical lawn? And I can probably think of kind of 3 reasons. One is that because of its design, rain gardens are, the soil is contoured so that it's creating kind of a bowl shape. So naturally, it's already in a kind of a captured situation by being able to have the soil capture that water because it's holding it like a cup, basically. The second thing is that rain gardens are typically fed water from other sources. So it might be a rooftop, or it might be a parking lot, or in this case for Crawford Park, we're capturing close to 12,000 square feet of runoff that wouldn't have been captured before. It just would have scooted on down the street. So, but because there's a trench drain there that allows the water to enter the rain garden, it's being fed much more water than what would just fall from the sky during a rain event. So we're directly capturing and allowing that water to move into the rain garden. And the third is what was already kind of addressed in the video, is looking at plant species that have just a much deeper root system that can absorb water, not just within the first 1 or 2 inches, but those roots expand down. And again, it depends on the plants that are being used, but you've got a much deeper root system to uptake that water. So there's kind of three reasons there: the shape of the rain garden, the source for the water is greater, and then also the plant material.
And Adley, I'd like to add a little bit more to the question about irrigation. Linda mentioned drip irrigation, and by and large, particularly for residential applications, the city encourages, or our water conservation program encourages people to consider drip irrigation for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, because it slows down the water flow and directs it where you want it and reduces evaporation. But one thing that's important to keep in mind with that, and you'll notice this if you come by and look at the park while it's being watered, the rain garden at Crawford Park does not use drip irrigation. Instead, it uses sprayers. And the reason for that is, there's a couple of reasons for that, but one main reason has to do with maintenance of drip systems, particularly in larger park settings. Parks have different requirements than residential yards do. And so the risk of damage to a drip irrigation system is much greater than the risk of damage to a sprayer system, and it's much easier to maintain. So in this application, you'll find that the Crawford Park Rain Garden is irrigated with sprayers rather than a drip irrigation system. Also, sometimes, and this isn't going to happen all the time, if you have a rain garden that's collecting a lot of water and that has a pretty active, wet area, some types of drip irrigation systems are prone to clogging, and there are some that are designed to reduce potential clogging. But if you don't have the right one in there, then you might find that you're constantly having to either replace emitters or tear up your, your drip lines and replace them. And that can be a lot of work and expensive. And so you have to think through exactly how you're going to implement things and what the trade-offs are.
We're out of time for the Q&A session. I do want to ask Sayetsi to share with folks how they can get involved in staying up to date on this project.
Of course. So one of the biggest ways that we try to provide information to our residents is social media. So you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook. We are under @EnviroWoodland. We were also very informative on our newsletter that we send out every month that includes information of what the city is doing, workshops, volunteer opportunities that are available. And I'll be sending out a link on how to sign up for the newsletter at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Sayetsi. And I will hand it over to you for the exciting portion of the evening.
That's right. So now it's time to announce our winners for the raffle. Right now we will be picking out 7 winners.
Give me a second to get this in full screen.
Congratulations, Nikki Swab. Second winner is Ashley Nakasanu.
Drum roll.
Margaret Weishart. Congratulations. Margaret Wong. Congratulations.
Final two.
Cindy Reed,
Final
you're a winner.
tonight.
Christina Linquist, congratulations. So everyone that has been selected as a winner tonight will be contacted by me tomorrow on how to receive your Rain Garden guidebook as well as your $25 gift card.
Great. And so that wraps up our Rain Garden 101 webinar this evening. Thank you all for attending. We're going to be emailing out a resource sheet to each of you that's going to include a link to the survey if you haven't filled it out yet, a PDF of the PowerPoint presentations, and a list of some other resources that you might find useful. So we hope you enjoyed tonight's webinar and found it interesting, and hope you got some ideas that you can use in your yards. And thank you all and have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.
All right, thank you.